Hi everyone. I can't believe that you're almost at the end of the school year. So I thought I'd better hurry up and finish reading this book to you before you go on holidays. And then you never get to hear the end of the story. Although I was thinking you could always read it yourself. It's a good book to read. Anyway, I wanted to show you something special. Today when I woke up and I looked out the window, can you see what I saw? It was snowing. I can't believe it. Right here, was not expecting to see snow. Anyway, it's actually cleared up a lot since this morning. The snow stopped falling. So I thought today would be a good time to read to you so you can see. This is actually looking out my kitchen window. My kitchen window, can you believe it? How very beautiful it is. I don't know if you can see all the way over the other side of the water there, but there's actually a beautiful rainbow in the sky. So pretty here. I'm very grateful. All right, let's get on with our story. Okay. The sound of Ben's scream. Oh, I wonder why he's screaming. Let's go back and find out. That's right, it was a giant rat. A giant rat was clinging to the top of his head. Ah! Screamed Ben. The sound of Ben's scream echoed through the length of the pipe. He whacked the rat off his head and it landed on top of Granny, who was crawling up the pipe just behind him. Poor little rat, she said. Be gentle with it, dear. But he was here first. Now come on, we have to hurry. The sleeping tonic chocolate cake I gave the guards will be wearing off soon. The pair crawled further up the pipe. It was wet and slippery and smelled awful. I wonder why it smelled awful. Can you remember why? Is there that steam in the background? That's actually coming off my heating system, my boiling heater system. That's how we get hot water, heating here. Heats up hot water and pumps it through some special heaters in the house. Anyway, back to the story. Unfortunately for Ben and Granny, it turns out that ancient poo does still pong. After a while, Ben could see a shaft of grey in all the black. It was the end of the tunnel, at last. He hauled himself out of the ancient stone privy and then reached down the pipe to help his granny clamber out. They were covered from head to toe in disgustingly stinky black slime. Standing inside the cold dark toilet, Ben spied a glassless window in the wall. They clambered through this and landed on the cold, wet grass of the tower's courtyard below. For a few moments they lay there, gazing up at the moon and the stars. Ben reached out and held Granny's hand. She squeezed it tight. "This is amazing, Ben." "This is amazing," said Ben. "Come on, dear," she whispered. "We've barely started yet." Ben stood up and helped Granny to her feet. The old lady immediately started unwrapping the cling film that she had waterproofed her handbag with. This took several minutes. "I think I may have overdone the cling film." Still, better safe than sorry. Eventually, the mile-long roll of cling film was off. A mile is a long way. Was off, and Granny took out a map Ben had cut out of a book in the school library. Oh, better not do that to any of our books. So the two unlikely thieves could locate Jewel House. It was eerie inside the Tower of London courtyard at night. The tower is said to be haunted by the ghosts of people who died there. Over the years, several guards have run away in terror, claiming that at the dead of night they had seen the ghosts of various historical figures who had died there. Now, though, there was something even stranger roaming the courtyard. What could it be? Granny in a wetsuit. "This way," hissed Granny, and Ben followed her down a walled passage. Ben's heart was beating so fast he thought he was going to explode. After a few minutes, they were standing outside Jewel House overlooking Tower Green and the monument to those who were beheaded or hanged there. Ben wondered if he and Granny would be executed if they were caught stealing the crown jewels, and a shiver ran down his spine. 2 beefeaters. Do you remember what the beefeaters were? Have a think. Did anybody get it? Beefeaters are the guards. The beefeaters were lying on the ground, snoring loudly. I'll show you a picture. See them there, laying on the ground? Anyway, their immaculate black and red uniforms, emblazoned with ER, were becoming soiled on the wet ground. Granny's herbal sleeping tonic in the chocolate cake had worked, but for how long? As she hurried past them, Granny let out a familiar quacking sound from her bottom. One of the guards' noses crinkled at the smell. Ben held his breath, not just because of the smell, but because he was afraid. Was Granny's bottom burp going to wake the guard up and ruin everything? An eternal moment passed. Then the guard opened one eye. Oh no! Granny pushed Ben back and raised her handbag as if to clobber the beefeater with it. This is it, thought Ben. We'll be hanged. But then the guard closed his eye again and continued snoring. Granny, please try to control your bottom, hissed Ben. I didn't do a thing, said Granny innocently. It must have been you. They tiptoed to the huge steel door at the front of Jewel House. Right, I just need your dad's power gel, said Granny, reaching inside her handbag. With a juddering whir, she started drilling through the series of locks on the door. One by one, the metal locks crumbled to the ground. All of a sudden, the guards snored extremely loudly. Ben froze, and Granny nearly dropped the power drill. The guards slept on, and after a few nerve-wracking minutes, the door was finally unlocked. Granny looked exhausted. Sweat was dripping down her forehead. She sat down on a low wall for a moment, then pulled out a thermos flask. Cabbage soup, she offered. No, thank you, Granny, replied Ben. He shifted uneasily. We'd better get going before the guards wake up. Rush, rush, rush. That's all you kids do these days. Patience is a virtue. She poured the last of her cabbage soup down her throat and rose to her feet. Delicious. Right, let's do this, she said. The huge steel door creaked as it opened, and Ben and Granny entered Jewel House. Out of the dark came a flurry of black feathers, hitting Ben and Granny in the face. Ben was so startled he screamed again. Shush, said Granny. What were they? Said Ben, as he saw the winged creatures disappear off into the black sky. Bats? No, dear, ravens. There are dozens of them here. Ravens have lived in the tower for hundreds of years. This place is spooky, said Ben, his stomach knotted in fear. Especially at nights, agreed Granny. Now stay close to me, boy, because it's about to get a lot spookier. A long, winding corridor stretched out ahead of them. This was where tourists from around the world queue for hours to see the crown jewels. Well, you saw where I was in the last part of the story. That's where they line up. The old lady and her grandson tiptoed their way silently along it, dripping smelly, icy water from the Thames in their wake. Finally, they turned a corner into the main room where all the jewels were kept. Like the sun bursting through the clouds on a grey day, the jewels illuminated Ben and Granny's faces. The pair of thieves stopped in awe. Their mouths fell open as they looked at the treasures laid out before them. They were more magnificent than anyone could imagine. It truly was the most superb collection of precious objects in the world. Dear reader, not only were they beautiful and priceless, they symbolised hundreds of years of history. There were a number of royal crowns, St. Edward's crown, with which the new king or queen is crowned by the Archbishop of Canterbury during the coronation ceremony. It's made of gold and decorated with sapphires and topazes, proper bling. The imperial state crown, in which were set an incredible 3,000 gems, including the second star of Africa, the second largest stone cut from the largest diamond ever found. No, I don't know where the first star is. The breathtaking imperial crown of India, set with around 6,000 diamonds and magnificent rubies and emeralds. Unfortunately, not in my size. The 12th century gold anointing spoon used to anoint the king or queen with holy oil, not to be used for eating Cocoa Pops. Not forgetting the ampulla, the gold flask in the form of an eagle which contains that holy oil, like a really posh thermos flask. And finally, the famous orb and sceptres. That's a lot of gear. If the crown jewels were featured in the Argos catalogue, they would probably look like this. I think that means like any shopping catalogue. Still don't know what Argos is. Can you see them there? It's like a shopping catalogue. Granny took out the rolled up supermarket carrier bag she'd kept in her handbag, ready to put the crown jewels in. Right, we just need to break through this glass, she whispered. Ben looked at her in disbelief. I'm not sure we're going to get all of these jewels in there. Well, sorry, dear, she whispered back. You have to pay 5 pence for plastic bags at the shops these days, so I only bought the one. It's true. Here in England, you have to pay for every single plastic bag. I think it's a good idea. It stops us using too many plastic bags. Anyway, the glass was inches thick, bulletproof. Ben had smuggled a few compound chemicals out of his science class and combined them to go kaboom if set alight. They stuck the chemicals to the glass with some blue tack. Then Granny attached one end of a ball of pink wool to the blue tack. Wool would be the perfect fuse. Then she produced some matches. They just needed to make sure they were far enough away from the explosion, otherwise they might be blown up too. Right, Ben, whispered Granny, let's get as far away from the glass as we can. The pair retreated around the wall, unravelling the pink wool as they went. Do you want to light the fuse? Said Granny. Ben nodded. He really wanted to, but his hands were trembling so much with excitement that he didn't know if he could. Ben opened the matchbox. There were only 2 matches inside. He went to strike the first, but his hands were shaking so much that it broke in 2 when he did. Oh dear, whispered Granny. Have another go. Ben picked up the second match. He tried to strike it, but nothing happened. Some river water must have leaked out of the sleeve of his wetsuit. Now both the match and the matchbox were soaking wet. No, cried Ben in desperation. Mum and Dad were right. I am useless. I can't even light a match. Granny put her arms around her grandson. As they cuddled, their wetsuits squeaked a little. Don't talk like that, Ben. You are an amazing young man. You really are. Since we have been spending so much time together, I am 100 times happier than I could ever say. Really? Said Ben. Really, replied Granny. And you are so clever. You planned this whole extraordinary heist yourself, and you're only 11 years old. I'm nearly 12, said Ben. Granny chuckled. But you get my point, dear. How many other children your age could plan something as daring as this? But we aren't going to steal the crown jewels now. So it's all been a massive waste of time. It's not over yet, said Granny as she pulled out a tin of cabbage soup from her handbag. We can always try some good old-fashioned brute force. Granny handed the tin to her grandson. Ben took it with a smile and then walked over to the cabinet. Here goes, said Ben as he swung back the tin to strike the glass. Please don't, said a voice from the shadows. Ben and Granny froze in terror. Was it a ghost? Who's there? Ben called out. The figure stepped out into the light. It was the Queen.